Welcome back, grade 7, to your semester 1 exam review. So we're going to begin with your worksheet now. We're going to start with the reading comprehension portion. I'm going to go ahead and read the text, which is called the Nika Revolt. Pay attention closely because there are questions that follow. So let's begin. Emperor Justinian, ruler of the Byzantine Empire from 527 until 565, was by all accounts an ambitious and energetic leader. Under his rule, there were huge advancements in law, military strategy, architecture, and the arts. His wife, Empress Theodora, was also a well-known figure. A former actress, she influenced many of Justinian's legal and social decisions and became one of the most powerful women in Byzantine history. Justinian's path was not always an easy one. Especially in the early years of his reign, his tactics often made life difficult for his subjects. In the capital city of Constantinople, taxes were high. Even so, they were not enough to finance Justinian's many military campaigns, and he took money from his people however he could. For example, he denied bonuses and pensions to the soldiers who had fought long and hard for him. Justinian's argument was that the soldiers ought to be satisfied that their emperor had managed to secure the peace. Securing the peace did not always mean protecting the individual citizens of Constantinople, however. If, for example, a wealthy nobleman was kidnapped and held for ransom, a common occurrence in those days, Justinian typically did nothing. His refusal to pay for the release of the nobleman usually resulted in the kidnapped man's death. The negative outcome did not keep Justinian from claiming all the dead nobleman's assets for the state. Injustices like these kept the people's discontent at a constant simmer. One January afternoon in 532, discontent over taxes boiled over into rage, and the furious citizens turned on their emperor. The trouble started at the sports arena known as the Hippodrome during one of Constantinople's wildly popular chariot races. On this particular day, the chariot drivers, well known for hurling insults at one another during the races, instead turned their curses on the emperor himself. For once, the entire crowd found something they could agree on. The thousands in the packed stadium picked up the chant against Justinian. "Nika," they shouted, "conquer!" Spilling out into the streets, they stormed the prison and released all the inmates. Then they started burning down buildings all over the city. Of course, it did not take long for the word of upheaval to reach Justinian. With the whole city in revolt, he knew he was vastly outnumbered. He began to make hasty arrangements for himself, his wife, and key members of his court to escape by ship. He felt he had no choice but to go into exile. Empress Theodora had other ideas on the matter. She spoke up with great passion, reminding Justinian that she herself had not been born into royalty, but had come from a hard life on the streets. She vowed that she would never give up her power to go into exile. She would stay on at the palace, she said, until she was taken from it by force. If she had to die for it, then let her burial shroud be purple, the color of royalty. Justinian was of course welcome to leave if he wished. The empress warned that if he ran away, he would later wish he had been courageous and stayed, even if it meant being killed by the mob. Theodora's bold words revived the emperor's ambition. Justinian decided to stay in Constantinople and tried to put down the revolt. It turned out that one of his best and most loyal military generals, Belisarius, had recently returned to the city with a large force of well-trained soldiers. The emperor ordered Belisarius and another general to take their men to the Hippodrome. There, a huge crowd of rebels had gathered. The two generals led their troops into the stadium through two different entrances. They trapped the rebels inside. The rebels had no organized plan, and the military showed no mercy. By the end of the fighting, 30,000 rebels lay dead. This ended the Nika Revolt. Justinian remained in power until his death in 565. On that January day in 532, during the Nika Revolt, had his wife decided to accompany the emperor into exile, things might have turned out very differently for both of them. Without the empress's stubborn refusal to be ousted, Justinian may never have found the courage to keep his throne. Okay, so now we're going to answer the questions based on the Nika Revolt. Circle 1, answer. Why did Emperor Justinian tax his people so highly? So this was explicitly mentioned in the text. If I look at A, he had to pay for weekly chariot races. This was not mentioned at all. B, he had to pay for huge ransoms on the victims of kidnappings. Again, he didn't care if anyone was kidnapped. C, he had to pay for the many wars he fought. Or D, he needed money to fulfill the needs of his powerful wife Theodora. Now, I know that letter D was never mentioned as well, and it says in the text explicitly that he had many military campaigns to pay for. So obviously it is letter C. He had to pay for the many wars he fought. Number 2, which of the following statements from the passage supports question 1? A, the trouble started at the sports arena. Well, I can see here that this is talking about possibly the introduction of the Nika Revolt, so I know that it's not A. B, a former actress, she influenced many of Justinian's legal and social decisions. Well, this is describing Theodora, which has nothing to do with the answer we chose in question 1. C, his refusal to pay for the release of the nobleman usually resulted in the kidnapped man's death. Again, it has nothing to do with the question in question number 1. And D, even so, they were not enough to finance Justinian's many military campaigns. Okay, so that looks like the answer that relates to the answer I chose in question 1. So now I know that both of the answers are correct because they both relate to each other. In your own words, describe what happened at the hippodrome. So simply put, I'm going to write that the people were distraught. The people revolted against Justinian and hurled insults at him. Number 4, which of the following statements supports your answer in question 3? If I look at A, injustices like kept the people's discontent at a constant simmer. B, she would stray on at one palace, she said, until she was taken from it by force. C, discontent over taxes boiled over into a rage, and the furious citizens turned on their emperor. And D, the two generals led their troops into the stadium through 2 different entrances. Well, I see that C relates to the answer I chose in question 3. This here supports my answer. Do you think that Theodora made the right decision to not want to live in exile? Why or why not? Use text evidence to support your answers. So you might all have different answers from each other. I personally believe that Theodora made the right decision, so I'm going to go ahead and start with that. Because if she hadn't done that, because if she had gone into exile, then Justinian probably wouldn't have felt so ambitious. So this is where I would enter my my text detail. Because her, quote, bold words revived Justinian's ambition and he decided to fight for his ring. Moving on to vocabulary, write the letter of the meaning next to each word. So I have number 1, which is feat. I know that feat is an amazing act or accomplishment, so I'm going to go ahead and fill that in with letter E. Number 2, a diagnosis is something a doctor gives me, so I'm going to assume that it is F. Diplomatic. I know that we use this word to describe something political, so I'm going to go ahead and put letter D, involving relationships between 2 countries. 4, countenance. So countenance is usually your face or your facial expression, so I'm going to go ahead and put A. 5, affected. If something is affected, it has an effect, so I'm going to go ahead and put B. And C, a frigate is a heavily armed ship of the 18th century. Now you have to write a sentence of your own using the given vocabulary. I'm not going to go through all of them simply because I want to see what you can produce. I'm just going to give you an example using the first vocabulary, and that is inclement. And inclement means stormy or unpleasant, so obviously this word is most likely going to be used to describe the weather. So I'm going to go ahead and write a sentence just from the top of my head, something like the inclement weather ruined the highly anticipated baseball game. Now please focus on the part of speech of this of every vocabulary. If it's a noun, use it as a noun. If it's a verb, use it as a verb. Don't change it up, because then that would change the whole context of the word. Let's continue. So now let's move on to grammar, simple past and past progressive. I'm going to look at number 1 now. While I blank, I had an accident. Now this sentence has 2 clauses. I can see in my second clause, I had an accident, that this is in the simple past. And in my first clause, I have the word while. So I can assume here that there is a tense interrupting another tense. And usually when that happens, that means that the simple past is interrupting the past progressive. So I can see that something was continuously happening when something started and finished. And that is why I'm going to choose the answer A, was driving. Number 2, the thieves were hiding in the kitchen when the police came in. Now this is the same concept, just simply that the past progressive is available and the simple past was removed. So I'm going to choose B, came. Kate blanked dinner and then did her homework. So this is the past. I can see that A is have, which is in the present, and B is had. So I already know from that that this is the answer. So it's B, had. And again, this is when the simple past shows 2 completed actions. So something finished before the other one started and finished. So number 4, while we blanked the house, we broke some plates. If I see here, again, I have while, and the second part is in the simple past. So again, it's the same thing like the first and second. There was an action interrupted by another completed action. So it is while we were cleaning. So now simple present and present progressive, I need to complete the sentences with the correct tense of the verbs. Let's look at number 1. I have 2 parts of this sentence. I usually blank blue jeans, but today I blank a dress. So if I look at the first part of the sentence, I can see the word usually. Well, I know if something regularly happens, then that means that it is most likely in the simple present. So I would just go ahead and write the verb down the way that it is, and that is where. And it doesn't change. I don't add an S or an ES because the pronoun here is singular, which is I. And the second part of the sentence, but today I blank a dress. Well, I can see the word but here, which is contradicting the first part of the sentence. And I can see that there's a specified time, which is today, and it's only happening today. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that this should be in the present progressive. I'm going to write my verb to be, and if I have my pronoun I need to use am, and then I need to turn the verb into an ing form, which is wearing. Now let's move on to number 2. Jake never blanked next to people. So if I see here that Jake doesn't do this typically, then I know that this is something that happens regularly. It's not something that changed. So I'm going to keep the verb the way that it is, except I'm going to add an S to it because I have my proper noun here, Jake, which is singular. So number 3, we to Turkey next week. Well, here I have a specified time frame, and it's not something that happened in the past, and it's not something that regularly happens, so I'm going to go ahead and write are going because it is in the present progressive. And I've used are because we is plural. Number 4, Marianne blanks Spanish this semester at university. Now, Marianne is doing something now, which it's specified here this semester. It's not something that was happening regularly and continuously. It's just happening this semester. So I'm going to assume that this should be in the present progressive. So I'm going to use my verb to be is and taking. And look at this. I've dropped the E in taking and I put ing. So now use to and would. Complete the sentences using used to or would. Some sentences can use either and some sentences can only use used to. Now remember, used to and would are used to describe past repeated activities. Used to can only be used when you're talking about, for example, someone's looks, whereas would be used to talk about repeated actions that no longer happen. So number 1, I blank to watch cartoons every Saturday with my family before going outside to play. Now this one is not showing anything that is no longer true. It's just showing me something that doesn't happen anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's would. I could use used to as well. It's not wrong. It's more common to use would. So I blank have short brown hair when I was younger, but now it is long and black. So this is what I mean where you can only use used to in specified moments. So for example, this is something that is no longer true, not something that no longer happens. So I'm going to use used to instead of would here, and I cannot use would because this is not something that happened. This is something that was true and no longer true. So now moving on to part D, write in advantages and disadvantages essay about the topic below. Again, I'm not going to show you something really extensive because I want you to produce something by yourself. Let's see, these days most things are being done by machines instead of humans. What are the advantages and disadvantages? So in this fast-paced technological world, a lot of things in factories are being made by machines. Do you think that this is helpful or do you think that this is detrimental? Do you think that maybe it would take less of a toll on human beings who are unable to do certain things? Or do you think that it would affect the job force and the amount of jobs there are for people? So make sure to include an introduction, a main body which is dedicated solely to the advantages, and a main body that is dedicated solely to the disadvantages. Do not merge the two. And then have a conclusion, and in the last sentence you can give me your opinion. So good luck on your semester 1 exams. Do contact me if you need anything, and remember, everything is on the drive. So good luck.